Hello and welcome to this introduction webinar for the World Benchmarking Alliance Climate and Energy Benchmark in the Automotive and Transportation Manufacturers sectors. My name is Marie Keeling and I'm the Research Manager in the Climate and Energy team. And I'm joined today by my colleagues to present the webinar that we will be conducting in 2024. Including a little bit about the methodologies that we use in this benchmark and the timelines that we have planned for this benchmarking cycle. I will hand it over to my two colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we'll get underway with the presentation.
Thank you, Marie. My name is Luis Costa. I'm the research lead for the Climate and Energy Benchmark at WBA. I'll be guiding you through the first part of the presentation, and I'll be joined by Gustav on the second part, and he can say a few words presenting himself.
Thank you, Luis. My name is Gustav Remmman. I am the analyst responsible for the social and just transition parts of this benchmark, and I'll hand it back to Luis to get started.
Thank you. So here we are. We are the World Benchmarking Alliance. Some of you might know us. For some of you, we might be a new company. So here, what we do. We are a non-profit organization. We hold the world's 2,000 most influenced companies accountable for their part in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Benchmarking the companies is what we do. We have a structure of around transformations to evaluate companies going across several domains like urban, food, agriculture, and for our case, decarbonization and energy. We publish our benchmarks on an open source way, comparing companies' performance across all these transformations that you see. We want to recognize leadership in our benchmarks and embed on them corporate accountability of what companies' role in achieving sustainable development goals. And of course, we are not alone into this. We want to realize impact together with a multi-stakeholder alliance that we build throughout the way, containing also other NGOs, but other institutions that are interested into promoting sustainable development. A few words about the number of companies and the footprint of these for you to have an idea. As I noticed before, we look at the 2,000 keystone companies. We define keystone company as a company that through their activities, being through the supply chain or through their production alone, command a large share of the world's production or services in a particular field, or agriculture, or heavy industries, or things like that. Also, the company that through its regional importance is capable of leveraging other stakeholders around its ecosystem, and a company that is influential also on terms of policy defining and its engagement with stakeholders. In total, we evaluate 2,000 of them and cover quite a large part of the world's GDP and also a huge number of employees. More concrete into the climate and energy benchmark, what we look at is mostly high emitting sectors. So what companies are performing, how companies are performing on their both climate side, how are they planning for a low carbon transition, how are they engaging in low carbon technologies, but also we look at the side on how companies are engaging on the just transition, what are they doing to respect the human rights of workers and of communities. We've been doing this for some time now, and by the end of 2024, we will have 450 companies on high emitting sectors assessed both for what they are doing in terms of their climate and decarbonization plans, but also in terms of their just transition relation to the workers. If we advance, we see here a portfolio of all the sectors that we already looked at. Our latest report was on heavy industries. You can check that. And for the purpose of this presentation, we'll be talking about the automotive and transportation manufacturers, which is the next sector in its scope. For these, and you notice that the title of the benchmark is quite long. We focus not only on the automotive, but also on transportation manufacturers. We think this makes a lot of sense. from a GHG perspective, we see that the automotive sector is still the one that contributes more for the total transportation sector GHG emissions, but transportation manufacturers also play a role. If we can see the next illustration, we can see that about a quarter of the global transportation sector emissions can be traced to shipping, rail, and aviation combined. So this is quite important. That's why we decided to take these two broad categories together to have an holistic understanding of the transportation system. This is not the first time we do this. We are more mature on the side of the automotive manufacturers. We've done this a couple of times. Some of you might trace back some of our emails and methodologies. We did this in 2019, 2021, 20 was just a minor update. And now 24, we will use an updated methodology to look at the automotive manufacturers. And for the first time, we are looking at the transportation manufacturers. This is a new thing for us. And on the 2024 year, they will be both assessed on their climate and just transition performance. There's 30 companies on the automotive side, distributed mostly through East Asia, Europe, and North America, commanding about 2.5 million employees. On the side of transportation manufacturers, less companies, but not less important in terms of employees, about 1 million employees, and focused more regionally on Europe and Central Asia. So now that you know who we are, what we want to do, how we are planning to do this, our climate and energy benchmark is constituted by two big chunks. One dedicated to the just transition and social indicators. We will be looking at things, how companies perform in engaging on social dialogue with workers and unions. What is the state of their just transition planning? What is the state of their just social protection, and how to advocate on policy level for more rights to workers. And we have then the side of the climate performance, which is done with methodologies sourced from the ACT initiative, where we will be looking at things like climate targets, investments done by the companies on low carbon technologies, and their relation with the supply chains. Important to notice here that in all of our benchmarks, we only use public data that the companies published or someone publishes on behalf of the companies, but still under the public domain. So we don't accept data that is not publicly disclosed. Moving on, talking to the climate side of our benchmark, we use a framework called Accelerate Climate Transition, a framework and set of methodologies published by ADEME, the French ecological agency, just some time ago. And basically, we look at how companies do in 5 key questions. What is the company planning to do in terms of their commitment to climate change? How they are planning to get there? How their transition plan is looking? What are companies doing right now? What investments are being put into paper or brought to paper to reality? What has the company done in the recent past? Did they do investments that put them on a low carbon trajectory or investments that put her on a high carbon trajectory? And at the end, how do all these questions and plans fit together in a consistent way? So this is the broad framework that we'll be looking companies through. And then more specific companies are evaluated across these questions, and then they are given a score, which has 3 components. If we go to the next slide, companies are evaluated on a performance score, on a narrative score, and on a trend score. I don't go into details of all of this. You can see it then by yourselves. But performance score looks more how companies are doing in terms of their climate planning, targets, material investments, so money being put into the right place. The narrative score is more overall assessment on the reputation of the company, potential risks the company is expected to face, and what is their business model and strategy. So the narrative score is a letter from A to D, while the performance score is a number from 0 to 20. And then we have a final component, which is the trend score, which from the overall assessment, we try to understand if the company, should it be evaluated the next year, if its performance is expected to be better, equal, or low. So it will get a plus, equal, or a minus in terms of a kind of a foreseeable near future, if the score or if the assessment will be repeated again. Just talking briefly about the specific methodology that we use for the climate part of the assessment. The automotive manufacturers will be evaluated on an updated ACT Automotive methodology. Under this methodology, automotive manufacturers that assemble vehicle parts and sell them are in focus. So these are the companies that we'll be evaluating. If you don't assemble a company and you provide parts, you will not be assessed under this methodology. And the methodology is restricted only to the manufacturing of light-duty vehicles, so the vehicles that weigh less than 3.5 tons. In terms of boundaries of the methodology, we look both at upstream, downstream, and also the operational emissions of the company. So we look at emissions that are associated with the products that companies purchase to manufacture the vehicles, emissions that the companies release while manufacturing the vehicles, and emissions that the product of the companies, in this case the light-duty vehicles, are expected to emit after they are sold to the operators. So all of these is in the boundary and in scope of the automotive methodology. Maybe going a bit into more detail, but rather quickly, they are kind of associated to these three boundaries. There are three sources of data for the benchmark and three sources of information that we use to benchmark the company in each of these boundaries. You can have a look afterwards, but the important thing to mention here is that all of the assessment that we do on this scope and on the emissions are targeted or are viewed in respect or in reference to a 1.5 degree trajectory in all of the different boundaries and emissions that we look at. Moving to some concrete examples of indicators that your company is expected to be benchmarked on. They are quantitative on the left or qualitative on the right. You have here some examples that you can have a look. It makes a little bit more concrete to know for you what are the examples of indicators that you will be assessed upon. So this is all for the auto manufacturers, but something very similar takes place for the transportation manufacturers. These are manufacturers of planes, ships, buses, trains, and trucks. Mostly they will be evaluated under the same scope and evaluated under a similar logic. We just use a different methodology, which we call ACT generic, given that the previous methodology was restricted to light-duty vehicles, so manufacturers of light-duty vehicles. But the assessment is pretty much the same. The weighting of the score is, of course, adapt to the specificities of the sector, but all that you've seen before, including the examples of indicators, are applicable also to these manufacturers. Yeah, thanks. I think this gives the overview of what will be done on the side of the climate, but of course we have still a big component to look at, which is the just transition and social component.
Thank you, Luis. So the just transition assessment has a foundation in our just transition methodology that we originally developed back in 2021. That goes to see the commitments of the Paris Agreement, that it is not only decarbonization, but it is decarbonization with respect for people, workers, and communities. Our methodology was originally developed in a big consultation process, and since then we have assessed almost 400 companies, many of them for the second time, to learn what a just transition looks like in a range of high emitting sectors. The indicators, as we can see on the next slide, cover everything from the process of a just transition, including social dialogue and planning, to some of the outcomes with job creation, re and upskilling, and social impact management. We designed this methodology to work together with our core social indicators that are applied to all sectors that the World Benchmarking Alliance benchmarks. They consider human rights, ethical business, and decent work. And where the just transition methodology looks towards social responsibility now and in the future, our core social indicators look at social responsibility now and in the past, if that gives some context to how the two methodologies work together to give a complete view of the social responsibility. As was explained earlier in the presentation, these two methodologies are weighted at 20% each of the total score of the benchmark, but of course they are broken out at the end. And I will hand over to my colleague Marie to wrap up the presentation.
Thanks, Gustav. Yes, so just to outline what exactly we produce with our benchmark. There are three components we can already see on our earlier iterations of the automotive benchmark, and that is that we produce a sectoral insights in the form of an insights report, which we're able to look at the data collected across the group of companies and really bring out some key messages for that sector. The second component is a company ranking, and the company ranking is made up of a company's score. So when you look at the company rankings page, you'll be able to see the high level scores for each company ranked in place. And for each company, there is an explanation of those scores and a more detailed scoring against each module as outlined by Luis in the case of ACT. So these are the three components that we are working on now. And if I go to our final slide, we are working currently on collecting data from public sources for this benchmark, and we will be doing that up until October. And in October, there is an opportunity for us to reach out to you as companies to validate the data that we've collected and provide additional information if it is already published in the public domain. From there, after we've completed this validation process, we then go away and score and prepare the benchmark for publication. And for this benchmark, we are planning to launch in December 2024. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. You will have received information also by email, but in the event of any additional questions, or if you would like to discuss anything in this presentation, our contact information is on screen. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to engage you soon in our benchmarking process.